Good morning. We continue our journey in the conclusion of Hemshech Ayin Beis. And a summary based on my essay, and that is the essay which is posted on our WhatsApp Ayin Beis group, which I'm looking up right now as we speak. The summary, the essay. I believe we are on page 29. Oh, what happened here? Sorry. Yeah. So we began chapter 6 of this essay, which was on page 28. We're now on page 29. And what I reviewed yesterday was the beginning of chapter 6. I went and did a whole overview of the first 5 chapters of this essay. So I'm not going to do again now because it's all in writing and we've discussed it. So where are we up to now? So we bring it back to the central theme of Ayin Beis. What is the central theme? The interface between the divine and existence, between God and existence, and in two manners, in 2 tracks. Mamata Lamaila, primarily through davening, tefillah, and Mamayla Lamata, primarily through Torah. And I said we will start explaining now more detail this difference, the difference between the two. And obviously the quality, each one contributes, and the joining of them together. Also, more explanation, excuse me. Sorry about that. More explanation in the triangle, in the 3-pronged connection between the Shamas, Torah, and Mitzvahs. So we began by discussing what it says earlier in volume 2, in chapter 378 of the Hemshech. In the difference between Mamat Lamayla and Mamay Lamata. And the main point, I'll just sum up what we said, was the difference consists of a few elements. Mamata Lamayla, it's all initiated by the Klei HaMakabel, by the recipient. And therefore it comes the Oyer in a Tzimtzum, which is dependent on the Makabel. So it comes in a diminished flow. Mamay Lamata, the Oyer is initiating it from above. It's being initiated from above, so it's an Oyer Atzmi, and it's not commensurate to the Klei HaMakabel. And he gives the mashal of 2 people, one on a mountain, one on a bika, in a you could say either plateau or even a even a valley. And there's 2 ways they can connect. Either the one on the below goes up, or the one on top comes down. So when it comes from the one below, there's a few conditions necessary. He has to have koyach to do so. You need strength to climb. Number 2, you need to know what path to take when you climb. And number 3, you need to eliminate any extra baggage or impediments that don't let you climb. In this case, the impediments of the animal soul. The second thing is knowing the paths of Pitera, the drachim in Avedus Hashem. And number 1 is the kayach atzmei of the individual. And then the farthest you can reach on your own is the root and source of where you originate from. You can't go higher than your own Sheiresh HaNevroim, like the ovis. Mamayla lamata, it works differently. Mamayla lamata, it's initiated from above. And I should add one more thing. And when it comes from below, it's commensurate to the Aveda and the Zichuch, the refinement that you created. The Hamshacha is basically measured by the ratio of your effort. Mamayla lamata, it's coming from Atzmus and Sof. So it's only by the Chefetz Atzmus, not Lefi Erech HaKeli, and that's Matan Teira. Okay. Now the difference between these two approaches is the difference between Tefillah and Teira. Tefillah is a Sulam Mutzav Arza, like a ladder. Rung by rung we climb. You start from Hoidu, Psukkah de Zimra, Brichas Krishma, V'haftas Hashem Elokecha, till you poil the bittel of the Nefesh Habamis. Teira, on the other hand, is Nitla Mamayla Lamato. Then, the next thing begins a longer discussion by the Rebbe Rashab in volume 2 that spans for 559 pages till the end of page 1349 in volume 3. And then begins on page 1350 till the end of the Hemshech, Hamshacha Mamayla Lamata through Teira. And that's where we stopped, the last paragraph on page 29. And that's where we'll continue now. So the last paragraph on page 20. V'hefresh beineim hu kanal. And the difference between Tefillah and Teira is like we said earlier. Shayidei ha-tefillah momata l'mayla. Davening, which is momat l'mayla. You sit down and you initiate. And you're davening. Mamshichim elikus b'b'chinas tzimtzum. You're mamshich elikus, because you're definitely connecting to Hashem, but it's in the form of a tzimtzum. It's commensurate, like I mentioned the example of a student reaching to a teacher to draw as much as he can receive. Sheyeh be'erech hatachten. So the hamshach is be'erech hatachten, again, commensurate and measured according to the parameters of the one below. So that's critical, because then it's in your kelim. It's bepnimius, it's integrated, it's internalized. Lefi erech hakelim v'anivroim, commensurate to the containers and to the creations. V'alkein eina nimshich ma'atzmei, and that's why it doesn't come on its own. Because it's going to be coming into your system, it comes rak ha'idei halas man shel hatachten. It's initiated and generated only through the effort from below. If you don't do anything, it's not going to just happen. So you have to ask for it. It's like a tefillah, you're asking. Like Hashem can obviously give you a gift, a matnas chinam, a free gift. But when it comes to tefillah, you're initiating and you're asking for it. So it's and it fits the way you were prepared for it. How you prepared, that's how you receive. It's a little like the Gemara says about Shabbos. Misha Torah be'erev Shabbos, yechel b'Shabbos. So it depends how you cook before Shabbos. That's what you'll eat on Shabbos. I'm not talking about the hamshach of Shabbos on its own, mekasha v'kaima, and the hamshachas that Shabbos brings us. We're talking about the things you prepare. As you prepare, that's what you'll have. Like in any type of preparation, what you prepare creates the container to receive. That's all mamata lamayla. Again, this is without any other support, without any hamshacha, as much as you can do. Like often you'll tell someone, you do your best. Like often I work with writers, and I say to them, write this article, and they'll say, I need help. I say, you do your best. Show me what you do, then I will edit it or I'll give you comments. So very often that's what you want a person to do, especially a good student. A good way of teaching is tell them, do the best you can, push yourself as far as you can, and then let's see what has to be done to help it grow and become better. So that's essentially what this means in simple English. B'loshen ha'hemshech, using the language and citing the language of the Hemshech Ayin Beis, shesutat le'el b'pedikei shel ha'hadazu, that was cited earlier in chapter 5 of this essay. Shehem esim tmuna b'ha'er, the kelim are making the image into the oir, because it's the kelim that are shaping the flow. Kfi eifan hakelim shalahem, commensurate and according to the parameters and the manner which the kelim are shaped. So you're taking, let's say, for argument's sake, you're taking a liquid, or you're taking water from a big barrel, and you're putting it into a cup that has a particular shape. So the cup is drawing the water according to its parameters. The kelim are defining, describing, and revealing the oir in their terms. This in simple language means when you explain something to someone, you say to someone, listen, let's say two people saw a beautiful natural sight, and they're both describing it to other people. They're each going to describe it through their lens, how they saw it. They may have similarities, but that means expressing something according to the kelim. So the toyar and Megilui is, you hear people talk about a farbrengen of the Rebbe, or different experiences they had with the Rebbe. You'll hear very often very different experiences. And they're all correct, but the keli is describing it according to their experience, which is critical here. It's not you're getting a gilui from above that's telling you here's what happened. You're getting it through the lens of the keli and the makabel. And it creates in the oyer a toyar, a shape, and tmuna, an image. That's the language in Ayin Beis, page 1348, that we cited earlier. This is all mamata lamaila, tefillah. What about Torah? Mamayla lamata. The ilu al yidei Torah, mamayla lamata. Torah is a very different story. Torah is God, Hashem, giving us. Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai. He's giving us His Torah. Starting Bereshis bara lekim hashamayim v'sa'aretz va'aretz seisateu v'vayu v'cheshach al pnei hasehem v'yemer lekim yehi oir. Where's that coming from? That's God's words. Dvar Hashem, that He spoke, and then was written down, and that's Hamshachim al-Maila. It's not Moshe initiating it, it's not no human being initiating it. So Torah is Mamayla Mata, Mamshichim Elikus she'eina be'erech ha'tachten klal. This is not measured according to the tachten. Now obviously the Eibishter, when he's Mamshich, he could choose to channel it as he sees fit, but it's not being initiated and not being driven by the tachten. It's being driven by the Elyon. Not l'fi erech ha'tachten klal. You're getting Elikus, undiluted, unfiltered. Shaloi l'fi erech ha'keli. And again, this doesn't mean the Eibishter can't put it into a keli, but it's not being driven by the keli. It's not l'fi erech ha'keli. V'loi l'fi erech ha'lo asman, b'loshna hemshech sham, and not l'fi erech your initiation. Like I said before, now lo asman mamata l'mayla. It's all about you initiate and commensurate to your initiation. Like I said before, when I work with different individuals, and I say to them, write an article. And they say, I need help. I can't really. I say, do the best you can. You always begin with that because you want someone to show what they can do. You also want to empower them. You want to educate them. Later, you could always add to it. But when it comes to Torah, it's not lefi erech hakeli and not lefi erech halos man. So there are times midah connected midah. You initiate something and you get a response. But then there are things sometimes you get a gift from above that's not commensurate to your response. Hashem can give you more than you asked for. But we're talking about this in the literal context of Mamat L'mayla on its own. Mamat L'mayla will reach as much as you initiate. You throw a stone, you put more power into it, it'll go farther. You put less power into it, it'll fly less, it won't travel as far. I misread. It's a period after Allah Asman. Then I write, Beloshana Hemshech Sham. Just like we brought before a language, we cited text from the Hemshech. So now, Beloshana Hemshech, Shetera Eli Yeshe Eir Atzmi. Being it's a Eir Atzmi. In other words, God is giving us an Eir in its own pure core form, not one that is initiated and defined by the Tachten, Huloi masha keli mamshich. It's not what the keli is mamshich. It's not the keli is initiating and drawing it down. V'loi masha keli tefus. And it's not what the keli, it's not according to the measurements or the parameters of the keli, what the keli can grasp. So again, Hashem chose to say things in order there should be some ability to receive. But basically, Torah itself, especially Torah Shebiksav, is pure likus. It's dibra b'loshem b'nei adam. It speaks in the language of man. But if you keep reading it, there's more and more to it because Hashem gave us, as I said, a snapshot, if you wish, or you could say a CAT scan or a image of from above, from the Ir Atzmi of Elikus. Next page 30. Amad Aleph Reish Pevav. That's the language on page 1286. Etzema Oir Shalamaylam B'chinas HaKelim. And you see, I've already used this language 3 times in the last chapter because it's so, I think, so critical, these lines, to help us understand where this would have gone, the Hemshech and the whole context. So it's Etzema Oir Shalamaylam B'chinas HaKelim, higher than Kelim, Uba B'derech Mamayla Lamato, and it comes from the top down. Ein HaKelim Eishim Beitmuna. So it's not Eir where the Kelim are creating an image or a picture. But Adarabah, on the contrary, Kifi Eifana Eir, Hutmuna Sakeli. That's according to the Eir, that creates the image in the Keli. So it's not, it's like I said before, I think even a better example. Let's say we're having people bearing witness to a certain event. Okay, somebody comes and says, I heard from somebody that was there that this and this is what happened. And he's a trustworthy witness. He didn't witness it himself, but he's sharing what he heard. Then another person comes and says, I heard this, and slowly you piece together the events that they're describing. Then suddenly news comes that there was someone who actually was at the event. So it's not second person. You call that person up to the stand, this witness, and they describe exactly what happened. I saw this and this and this and this. This doesn't necessarily contradict what the first witnesses said, because what those people testified. However, then you start seeing, oh, this is a direct picture of exactly what happened. Or even better, you get a video of it. So again, all the testimony and all the witnesses, or each one, may have captured pieces of it. So the Lefi Eifan HaKeli is the ones that they're telling you through their lens, through what they heard, through their perspective. The last one is you want to hear it exactly as it happened. Now, in Elikus, the same thing. You want Elikus that relates to you through your lens, through your kelim, through your understanding. Even as we're learning right now. I'm teaching you an idea here. We're learning together an idea. The Rebbe Rashab is writing what he's writing. I'm trying to explain it. I'm explaining it as I understand it, obviously. Each of you is going to have to work it out to understand it through your kelim. Now, you may come to the exact same way of understanding as I do, but the bottom line is, wherever you are right now, you're going to understand it according to your parameters. That's what a keli is supposed to do. And then you want to go back and say, what did the Oyer have to say? What does the Rebbe Rashab say in his original? And you read it now through his eyes, not through your eyes. So in a way, like Yehuda Tata is a elikus through our eyes, through existence eyes. Yehuda Ilah is elikus through God's eyes. And then, of course, there's the Yuchud, which we'll talk about later, coming together. So right now, that's the difference between Tefillah and Torah, Mamat L'mayla, Mamay L'mata. Okay. So, yeah. So on top of page 30, first paragraph. Let me stop if there are any questions. It's a topic we've been discussing quite a few times, discussed in the last classes, but also earlier. So I hope, obviously you can always review it again and again, but that's why I stopped for any questions. But This is not the first time we have learned, discussed this, but I'm happy to clarify anything if anybody wants me to clarify. So now comes next paragraph. Yeah. You want to say something? So paragraph 2 now on page 30. Someone's saying something?
Rabbi Teichel is either speaking or has his mic on and we're hearing his background.
Yeah, Shlomi, fix up your setup. We can't hear you.
Could you hear me
Maybe
now?
he's not speaking.
Could you hear me now?
Yeah, now you're good.
The Bilmaino Lamato is not only that it's not lefi the halos mind, but it makes the matter should be above the limits of the matter. That's a milo of Bilmaino Lamato. It takes him above. Correct?
Yes, correct.
Could you? Thank you.
Yep. Yep. Okay, good. So next paragraph, on second paragraph, page 30. And now when you bring them both together, tefillah, v'teira, because remember, we have the obligation, our mitzvahs, to both daven and learn. Tefillah and teira. Mamshichim hayichud b'shleimus ben elamis ve'elikus. When you bring them together, now you have a total and complete yichud between godliness, between elikus and elamis. Remember the essential theme of the interface, because you have both milas. Elikus shalamayla me'elamis. On one hand, through Teda you have elikus that's higher than the parameters of existence. Eir atzmi, de Teda eir mamayla lamata. Through Teda eir, from the top down, you have the eir atzmi that's higher than existence. B'teicha kelim va'elamis, which comes through al yidei avedas hatfilim al matlamayla, which integrates and internalizes. So if you have both, if you have only tefillah, so then you have primarily the hamshacha within the kelim and lefi the kelim. But when you have if you have only Teda, you have primarily the hamshacha higher than the kelim. But when you have both, you're getting both milas together. Imam milas shebachol echad mehem, with the qualities that each one of them contributes. Hayichud shel yichud tata v'yichud de'ilah. You have now the yichud of both yichudim, the yichud from the lower yichud, lefi ha-kelim, and coming from the kelim, initiated by the kelim, and yichud de'ilah. Aydam shachas ha'atzmus shalamayla mishneim. Because now we're getting the amshach of atzmus, the third level, that's higher than both, and that's why it could join them both. Hanesa markozi, and this is the central theme, shall kol hemshech terav kanal barucha, of the whole hemshech Ayin Beis, as discussed at length earlier. So now we see how Teda and Tefillah come together. Now, why is this so critical to emphasize? Because the Rebbe Rashab never gets back to this point. He speaks 559 pages about Tefillah, primarily Tefillah, I should say. Then he speaks like another 100, and what did I say, from 1350 to 1470, 120, 130 pages about Teda, primarily Mamayla Lamata. Then the end, he talks about the Yichud of Yichud Ilah, Yichud Datah, but through the context of Shema, Hashem Echad, but never concludes the topic. He doesn't even conclude that it affects the animal soul, and doesn't conclude Ner Mitzvah and Teda Eir, which most likely would have been the continuation, as we discussed at length. And what would come after that? Most likely he'd come back to Teda Eir and then bring it back to Tefillah. That's what I'm doing here in this essay. So essentially, if we were to continue the Hemshech Ayin Beis briefly, it would be the very chapters of this essay. The first thing would be how the Yichud of Hashem Echad, Yichud Ilah, Yichud Tatah, connected together, affects the animal soul. V'haftas Hashem Elokecha. Then he would go to Ner Mitzvah, because that's the last questions he asked. Then he would go to Torah. We already talked about 1, 2, 3, the first 3 chapters of this essay. Then he would talk about how they all work together. Then he would talk about Riyah. In chapter 5, we discussed Riyah because he talked about Riyah, the vision and the eyesight that Torah provides in illuminating the neshama. And then the next logical step would be going back to connecting the 559 pages and the 130 pages, which is Tefillah and Torah. So that's what I'm doing right here. And saying this exactly would be in the flow. So I'm just bringing it back. This was the ultimate purpose of me writing the essay, was to try to reconstruct, based on what the Rebbe Rashab already did say, and based on the Maimorim, Magbil Shevis, Einenu Me'iris, etc., Einenu Me'iris, and the other Maimorim, what the pieces would have been. So again, the chapters of this essay are literally each chapter addressing in that order. That's why I wrote in the beginning of the essay that I'm going to reconstruct it backwards, meaning the last first. Whatever the Rebbe Rashab didn't finish last, let's answer that question, then work our way back till we can reconstruct the whole connection. I'm still going to reconstruct it all the way back to the beginning of Ayin Beis. We didn't do that yet. Right now, we're back to volume 2, where he begins the discussion of what is Mamat Lamayla, Mamay Lamata. And this, at the end of the Hemshech, the continuation of the Hemshech would have been clearly bringing them together, the joining of Torah and Tefillah, Mamat Lamayla, Mamay Lamata, the central theme of Ayin Beis. So, could be what I just said was already implicit and everyone got it, but I felt important to just spell it out. Okay. Any questions? And I have to say, when I say it, I do feel a certain element of gratification. I mean, really humble gratification, because I think this is a contribution, if I may say so myself, to really and do what's the word I want to say? Do respect and the right honoring the Rebbe Rashab and all that he invested in Ayin Beis. And though, again, he didn't finish it, I think the minimum we could do is try to understand how it would have continued, based, of course, on what he did say and what it says in other Maimorim, and all with the qualification that is the best to my ability that I was able to do, with all possible human error that all of us are capable of.
You mean to do it justice.
Do it justice. That's the right word. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
What I found interesting, yesterday's class in particular, is you're not just out talking about how this essay was going to answer Rashab asked but didn't answer, but essentially what you're doing is, and maybe it's the same thing, but I don't think it's the same thing. You're finishing the Hemshech. You're writing in a nutshell, maybe not exactly word for word, but you're essentially finishing the Hemshech. You're not just answering questions. You're integrating it all in a way that if you follow everything you're writing and bringing in the sources, particularly as the two Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe and the Middle Rebbe, Magbil Shevis, you're essentially finishing the Hemshech. I mean, I'm not saying you want to take that schut or that responsibility to say.
Yes, in essence, you're correct, and I that's why all the qualifications, because only a Rebbe can finish a Hemshech. But as Chassidim, I think, again, I would never have done this just like out of the blue. I remember when we were learning earlier, and I had not yet figured out what would come afterwards. I always was like, in the back of my mind, saying, what's going to happen when we finish? And I know it's not finished. Will we be able to figure out, is it just like 5 more lines missing? Is it 5 pages? Is it 500 pages? And I had no clue, to be honest, because I hadn't learned it yet. I mean, properly enough to have been able to start doing this. So when we were getting closer to the end, and then when I discovered the Maimar Magbila Shevs, I can't tell you what kind of simcha I had. I couldn't believe it even. I thought it was like a revelation from heaven, because I saw literally that the Rebbe Rashab, firstly, he tells us clearly all this is Barucha in that Maimar Magbila Shevs. So that to me was the Rebbe Rashab saying it. He's telling us. It's not like I found the Maimar somewhere. He actually said the Maimar on page 1352. And on Kol Zeh, he writes, it's all this Barucha in the Maimar Magbila Shevs. Then when I saw that the rest of the flow and the structure was literally following on Magbila Shevs, that to me was like heaven sent. I said to myself, you know what? You have to be, I mean, it would be like a crime if I don't follow this treasure hunt, so to speak, these clues, because it was so obvious. Still had to work it out. Trust me, it was not like, okay, it wasn't on a silver platter, but I had what to build upon, and literally looking at seeing that I started looking entire pieces straight from Magbila Shevs, the Alter Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, and that gave me the confidence that it could very well be, I mean, everything is hashgacha, that Rebbe Rashab, in his own interesting way, embedded all of this, just in case, for whatever reason, he wouldn't finish it. And he wrote, and then the Kamoishis Boers. I started looking at all the places he writes, as shall be explained, and he didn't explain it, and the questions he left. And I noticed even places where he wrote questions more than once. And I even wondered, why would you repeat the question? You already said the question. So it was all to me like literally treasures, literally like you know when you go on a treasure hunt, and you're going, you don't know if you're going to be able to go further, and then you find another little clue, and another clue, another clue. So just saying you, that was the background behind how I did it. And that's when I was able to feel confident, you know what, let me put it out there. You know, obviously anyone can come and argue, disagree, whatever, agree, concur. And I'm just, I may have said this already, but I have to share, this was one of my most exciting journeys I've ever taken. Anyway, just some hergation feelings. I'm just responding what you just said, Yitzchak, about conclusion.
Yeah, no, of course. I thank you for sharing that, and I can't even imagine what it would be like. It must have taken, to some extent, taking you back to your days of being a choser, and sort of imagining how would the Rebbe, but I mean,
For
how
sure,
would
no question,
conceive
absolutely.
of how to give it over? Yeah,
I don't think if I didn't do that work back then,
you could do this.
I wouldn't have the wherewithal and also the skill to do this. Because you have to be able to know how the Rabbeim work, that they quote something and they add to it. You want to do it with authority. You don't want to just do it like, it's not just you have a brilliant mind and you're just piecing pieces together. You really want to make sure it's properly grounded and properly qualified, and so, yeah, there's no question. I couldn't have done that without years of experience of the methodology, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Few little little fabreng in the middle of this learning. So let's continue. Unless there's anything, other comments, questions, anybody. So we could say that we are making history here a bit. I don't know how many people know about it, but I think it's a pretty, from a, even on a global level, but from the world of Chassidus, this is pretty significant. Okay. Now, so far what we have here is, the joining of Tefillah and Torah through the third level, Atzmus, joins them together, the mile of both. And that's the central theme. But remember, the Neir is made up of, I'm sorry. We've been talking about these two Torah and Tefillah, But we know there's one more tremendous critical factor, the neshama. The third piece in this whole puzzle. The neshama that implements all of this, that we've been discussing at length, how the neshama on its own has power, then the power of ner mitzvah, teira, and that's where later in the hemshech, like I mentioned yesterday, after the long discussion of teira and tefillah and teira, the Rebbe Rashab introduces the three things: ner Hashem nishmas adam, ner mitzvah, and teira. That's what we're going to address now. Ubepratius yeser, this interface of tefillah and teira, and the joining of both of them, when you break it down, yesh b'zeh gimel inyanim. There are actually three elements here. Ner Hashem nishmas adam, the soul of man, which is the flame or lamp of God. Ner mitzvah, and teira, v'teira. K'mavur b'klolos ha'hemshech, k'mavur b'klolos ba'hemshech shalafanenu, as he explains in general in our hemshech, the presenting hemshech, the one that we are studying. El shabir sham lein nigmar. However, going back to the theme, the point here, the explanation of this was never finished. The Rebbe Rashab never got back to the full explanation, especially of ner mitzvah and teira. Now, so I'm repeating something I've already written, but I just wanted to contextualize it. But the Maimer HaMagbi Hanal, Ochein Mefurish, there indeed he does explicitly explain Umavur. It's explicit and explained Ha'inyan Beprotius Ubarichas. This inyan, these three things, Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, Ner Mitzvah and Terer, in detail and relatively at length. Canal, as we discussed earlier in this essay, Beprokim, Beis Gimel V'Dalet, chapters 2, 3, and 4, Shala Arazu of this essay. And now I'm going to bring that back into the picture here in context of the central theme of Ayin Beis. So though we can already extrapolate it, but I spell it out. Now, how do we explain the neshama, mitzvah, and teira in the context of this yichud of teira and tefillah, which of course all comes together. Teira is teira, but tefillah, and we'll soon see how it works. So I'm now really connecting basically the two tracks that begin the 559 pages of primarily Mamat L'mayla Tefillah, the pages about teira. How are we connecting that to these three elements, the neshama, ner mitzvah, and teira? And specifically, you see, we haven't talked about much about mitzvahs themselves, except as a subcategory of teira. But exactly the unique role of mitzvahs. So that's going to be discussed more in detail here. And you're going to see, I'm going to really tie it all together in a very, as much as as much as possible, seamless fashion as possible. Okay. Ready to go? Or any questions? I think it's clear. So here's the story. This is summing up. You're not gonna, I think anything I'm gonna read now is should be familiar because it's been discussed. But again, this is now in broader context. Haneshama Yeredes Lamata, Be'elam Haza Tacht. The neshama descends below into this lowest of worlds. And now, to fulfill its purpose, the neshama, through davening, neshama davens every morning, all tefillahs, I should say, but especially he's talking, of course, Shema, because Shema is such the central prayer, which comes la'achrei Hagdomas, Psuka de Zimra, Birchas Yetzer, Birchas Avas Elam, which comes, as we mentioned a little earlier, about the rungs of the ladder. If you remember, he spoke about Haidu, Psuka de Zimra, the blessings before Shema, which is Birchas Yetzer and Birchas Avas Elam, two brachas. It's a quote. This is a quote straight from Ayin Beis. Quote straight from the Alter Rebbe's Maimer. Ner shal neshama sheim is beinenes nefesh alikis atzma. Shem is beinenus, sorry. Shem is beinenus nefesh alikis atzma. So what is this first initial Aveda, the neshama comes down below, and the process begins with the candle, the flame of the soul, through the contemplation of the nefesh alikis atzma. We're not talking about yet, not with any support of mitzvah, ner mitzvah, and teira er. Atzma. And you recall that language used earlier when we discussed at length. Why is it called neshama atzma? Because it's not yet utilizing any other resources except its own divine nature. So hypothetically, in concept, even if we were never given teira mitzvahs, a neshama would have the natural inclination to turn to its maker, to its creator, because a neshama is divine, and speak to God, to daven. I'm not saying whether it know all the words in tefillah, or even that there's a mitzvah of tefillah, but just the fact that neshama is a child of God. And even though it's in this dark world, it would naturally have certain transcendent longings which translate into tefillah. It would be like the neshama naturally starting to sing. Now, we don't have this hypothetical because once Torah was given, we're told about davening. But think about Adam and Chava, for example. We know after they ate from the tree of knowledge, which was immediate, that Friday when they were created, according to the Psukim and Chazal. So then they realized what they did. When the darkness began to descend, Motzei Shabbos, it's a whole Gemara, they began to daven. That's what it says. They began to daven. They felt bad. They realized that they may have destroyed the world. Now, how did they know how to daven? Doesn't say. Did they have a Torah? Did Hashem tell them? Doesn't say. You don't have to say that they had that. But they had neshama. They had nefesh, they had the vayipach ba'ap of nishmas chayim. They had a conscience. That's actually why they covered themselves as well after they ate from Eitz Hadas. Who told them to cover themselves? They had natural shame that they did something wrong, and suddenly they felt their own sexuality, and all that comes with that. So I'm just giving, it's my own example. I've not seen it in Chassidus, I've not seen it in the Ayin Beis or the Alter Rebbe's Maimer and so on. But it's just to try to explain a neshama on its own, so to speak. If hypothetically it didn't have any other resources. Now you could say that itself is a resource. Of course it is. Because if you don't have a neshama, you're not going to feel anything. But they felt it and they davened that Motzei Shabbos and they did Shuvah. It's a Gemara in Avodah Zarah in the beginning that talks about this. The point being is, I just wanted to talk about it just to give, to be able to imagine what would be Nefesh Atzma, what he calls Nefesh Alikis Atzma. And this quote is Lashon HaTorah Lamed Ches Gimel. It's Alter Rebbe's Lashon in page 38 Gimel in the Maimer HaMakbil Shabbos. 38c, I should say. Shemiyachdim Oisei Yizbarach Lamata. What is the neshama doing when it says Shema? And again, Shema, you can immediately say, how did the neshama say Shema? Shema is a pasuk in the Torah. So fine. Obviously, as I said, it's a pure hypothetical. Would the neshama say Shema on its own? Not necessarily. Maybe Adam and Chava would, because maybe they had higher consciousness, and they did know the Torah subconsciously in a way, even before it was given. I don't want to go into that discussion. I don't know if we have sources for. But the point being is, the concept of a neshama davening and saying Shema can be called neshama atzma. And what are they doing? Shemiyachdim eisei yizbarach lamata. Connecting to Hashem echad, being miyachid Hashem lamata. Saying, even though the neshama is down below, I'm recognizing the unity of existence with godliness to the best of my ability. That's what the neshama is doing in tefillah. Ba'amidas v'izbonus ba'Hashem echad b'krishma. While when you're saying and contemplating on Hashem echad in Shema. Hamaydik be'echad, in the language that we learned earlier in Ayin Beis in volume 3, when you extend the echad, like he explained, extending here means, in this context, elaborating on, thinking about it, concentrating in an elaborate fashion, as we learned at length. So this is Pu'ulas HaNeshama Atzma. This is the Pu'ula, the action or the effect of the soul itself, the activity of the soul itself, Hapsila, the wick, Lahapich HaNefesh HaBamis, to transform the animal soul, Hashemen, which is the oil, into fuel, La'ava Kirish Be'esh, to a fiery, passionate love of Hashem, V'haftas Hashem Elekecha b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha. That's how the Alter Rebbe and the Rebbe Rashab as well explains the first step. What does the neshama do when it says Shema? This step. We've not yet discussed any additional resource. So this, as I said, we've learned. But now I'm putting it in the context of the whole yichud of Elikus and Elamus, especially through Tefillah and Torah. And you'll see how it all connects as we go along. That's the first piece. The next paragraphs are going to be about now what else does the neshama get? What resources? So the next one is going to be ner mitzvah. By putting on talis and tefillin before davening, like he explains, now the neshama is getting an extra boost, an extra resource, extra strength to achieve and accomplish its mission in this world. And from that, we're going to move from there to Torah, obviously. So it's going to be step by step, and it's all going to be now in the context of what's mamata l'mayla, what's mamayla l'mata. So we could say clearly, neshama doing this through tefillah is mamata l'mayla, because it's not getting any resource. I mean, yes, it's again the resource of the neshama. We'll talk about that a little later, more in depth. But it's not Hashem saying to Adam and Chava, listen, now is the time to daven, or to do tshuva, or when we wake up in the morning, or let's call it the natural inclination of the soul to long and connect to Hashem is initiated by the neshama. We're not talking now an initiation from above. So this is essentially a mamatal ma'ad. When we say halas man, tefillah is halah mamatal ma'ad. The sulam, we're building a ladder from the bottom up. The ladder begins on earth. Mutzav arza, standing on the ground, meaning where we are. And then we climb up. Sulam mutzav arza, reshe magia shamayim, and we reach toward heaven. So that's step number one in this whole process. I'm going to stop here, but I'll stop for questions, obviously, but I'm going to stop reading the text right here. So we are right now, middle of page 30, basically. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, did 4 paragraphs on page 30. Okay. Any questions?
Adam and Chava before the Chet, what was their avodah? It was already after the Tzimtzum, correct?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And what was their avodah?
The avodah, had they not eaten from Chet Tzadas, to use the language from the Pasuk, La'ovda l'shamra, which is, of course, Ramach mitzvah sesa, shasa le'sasa, they would have been developing Gan Eden, not just begashmius, but ruchnius, like we learned earlier in volume 3, actually, that they would be producing more and more lakus through their avodah lamata. Essentially, the Geula would have come, and it would be like the avodah la'achrei Mashiach, which means not avodah of melchama with Ra, because that happened after Chet Tzadas, but basically being mamshich what the Alter Rebbe calls liyachid yichudim elyenim, to be mamshich more and more lakus into this world. Essentially, what would happen after Mashiach comes once Ruach Hatuma Avim in the Aretz, and the Yetzer Hara is Shchitas HaYetzer Hara. That would be essentially the Aveda. It wouldn't be so, let's put it this way, it wouldn't be so dramatic as it is now.
But like you said,
I have to apologize for that. I can't say that. It would be very dramatic. It just wouldn't have the battles of the difficulties of life. So it would be really good to better, ad ein sof. Like when we say tzaddikim eilem manucha loy be'elam hazav loy be'elam haba. Shenemer yelchem achayil al choyel yiroel alakim betzion. It would be a yelchem achayil al choyel mailim bekedesh, in kedesh itself more and more and higher and higher.
Could we say that Hashem wanted it should be take Yelamato and the lowest of the lowest?
That's why we say about we speak about that Neira Alila al Bnei Adam, right? That Hashem did set it up. He put an Eitz Hadas in there. He gave them Nachash, the Nachash HaKadmeni that incited them. So that's a bigger discussion. What God's plan was, that He set them up, that He lead them on to ultimately sin. But this is not the discussion Ayin Beis now, and I don't want to go there right now. It's a whole other sugya.
That's an interesting thing. I was last week in the Alps. I heard your shiur in there, and there was one of the Tzarov, not from Lubavitch, and he asked, how is the Nachash coming in Gan Eden? But according to Chassidus, we know.
Okay, but you know what? This I would take offline. It's not part of this Ayin Beis. It's a great question, deserves plenty of discussion. But if you don't mind, let me just finish if anyone has questions on what we're learning right now, and then we'll conclude with that. And we could always discuss other things at other time, if you don't mind. Okay?
So I had a question that it's a little bit more zooming out, but it is along the lines of the mini little Farbrengen we had just 10 minutes ago. It occurred to me when I understood that you were essentially writing the end of Ayin Beis. I mean, you didn't write it. I mean, it is. I mean, you did it with commentary, explained how you got there, you explained every step of the way, like really like a good advocate. In other words, you're just making your argument saying it has to be, that it kind of has to be this way because you put it all together. Anyways, we talked about that. It occurred to me, assuming you're right, that what the Rebbe Rashab has done would have been nice to be finished, but he's essentially given us so many things, but among them, a roadmap for our avoda in a very macroscopic way. So you have Torah, Tefillah, Maas, and Toivim. We typically talk about as the pillars of Jewish service, if you will. And it seems to me, Torah and Tefillah are obvious. Chasadim is a little more difficult to fit into this work, but to me, it's avodas hanashama. When we're talking about the transformation of the Nefesh Bahamas, essentially, that's what Gemilas Chassidim are. It's selfless acts. When we do things that are channel elikus into the world, and we behave like our finest selves, which is the transformation of Nefesh Bahamas into something into elikus. That's what an act of kindness is in the world. Is when we are being our best selves, we're giving stuff, we're being nice to people, we're smiling, we're helping people. It seems to me that it fits perfectly. And if I'm right, then the Rebbe Rashab has given us essentially, a complete roadmap for understanding what is the panemius, the inner meaning of all of Jewish divine worship, service, observance, and more than that, he did it with his mashal of the Ner. As I kept thinking to myself, why is the Ner coming up so much? Yes, it's interesting to dissect it and understand what each part means in each aspect of the Neshama and Torah, Chulu. But then I thought to myself, he did it because it's a great way. It's a great mnemonic. I don't say mnemonic like we say a memory device, but in a sense, it's a great mashal because it encapsulates all the aspects of understanding how he gives us over in one. I mean, it's not simple when you dissect it. It's pretty complicated, but there's really only three elements. There's the wick, there's the fuel, and there's the flame. And then, and if you think about it, and of course the Rebbein get credit for this, not you. No disrespect. But this mashal is something we can take with us wherever we go. We say, okay, what am I supposed to be doing here when I'm learning Torah? Okay, I'm davening. What am I supposed to be doing here when I'm davening? And finally, when I'm engaging in acts of kindness, chasadim, what's happening here? among other things, this isn't about me. This is about the other person. If I'm really going to be transforming my nefesh of Bahamas, I have to get the self out of the way. Frankly, it's about bittul. So when you really think about what's been the project that was set up here by the Rebbe Rashab, of course, based on all the chassidus of the Rebbe before him, you have a primer for what it means to be a yid, frankly. I mean, I see it as nothing less than that. I'm curious to hear your comments on that.
To me, it's obvious. My comments is what you said is accurate, and it's to me, like I said, it's a given.
Well, we never pulled it together that way, you know. We've never pulled it together that way.
I'm not taking away from what you just said, but I think I've said it many times, maybe in different words. But that's essentially as soon as you say the whole theme of Ayin Beis is how to unite God and existence and us, and then he breaks it down into those two tracks, Torah and Tefillah, and then he breaks it down further with Neshama, Ner Mitzvah, Ner Torah, and then in the Ner itself, you have the whole thing, especially that's like the last, I guess, 120 pages of Ayin Beis, you can say really goes into the Ner, which is, of course, the Maimer HaMagbiel L'Sheves. The whole central theme of the Maimer is exactly that, the Ner and its three components. So what you said is I totally concur with, and I've always seen it that way.
Amazing. And it also helps, like if I were to give it over, many times people say, so what are you learning over there in Ayin Beis? And I'm like, where do I start? And like, this is like...
I'll take it a step further. Every time you light Shabbos candle, or Hanukkah candle, or Yisker, or something like that, God forbid, for someone that does that, whenever you light candles, you could just look at the candle and say, hey, here we have it all. In this little candle, you have... Look at the flame, look at the wick, look at the oil, or the wax or whatever, and you have the story of life.
Yeah. It's breathtaking if you think about it. I mean, the brilliance of taking a simple metaphor like that and then through the diuk and the iyun, drawing out, you know.
Totally agree, and. Yeah, absolutely.
But I guess finally, thank you, because I don't think I would have come to that realization if you hadn't written this essay and pulled it all together. I mean, yes, you've mentioned it in class multiple times, but not the full picture, because you can't have the full picture until you finish answering the shilas.
No, I understand, and I'll tell you right now, you're going to have more epiphanies as time passes. That's how it is.
Exciting. Very exciting.
That's how it is. Absolutely.
So thank you. I mean, this is a gift that you've given, well, our class, but the world. If people, this has to get out. I mean, I know you've got 1,000,001 projects, but like I said, maybe one of my days when I had more time, the Ava should help me. I would love to translate.
Well, even on a very basic level, I think we could share this. I share this with people I meet who learn chassidus, and often tell people what we're doing. As a matter, is Rab Shlomo on the call?
Yeah.
Today I had a phone call with someone. A dayan in Yerushalayim told me he's a mishpacha with you. His name is. Let me just find his name here. And I'm telling him that we are going to see each other soon in a shir in Ayin Beis. Rab Moshe Brandsdorfer?
Of course. It's a big dayan. Of course. How did you
I was a little chutzpahdik to him today, but it's all right.
You should be able to be a little careful with him because he's a sharp guy.
I know. Don't worry. I think I'm a little sharp myself.
I was just going to say the Dayan should be concerned about Rabbi Jacobson.
We're dealing with a complicated case, and I think it was very good.
Oh, you were advocating for...
How you related to him?
His father was a very, very famous Dayan, and he is my first cousin.
How is he your first cousin?
His father's father is a brother of my mother.
Ah, interesting. Okay. What was your mother's maiden name?
Brandsdorfer.
Oh, wow. Anyway, I had a long conversation with him this morning, and it was very interesting. And he mentioned, he said he can Rab Shleimus. I said, I'm going to be learning with Rab Shleimus soon, Ayin Beis.
Yeshakreach.
Elen
One more.
Chassidus, Eken Chassidus, Elen Chassidus. What's the story with him?
He wrote Shailus Tshuvas in Halacha 6 books, and he's writing it in a very clear way, not with long.
No, but I'm saying Chassidus, and does he have any exposure to Chassidus?
He's a Toldos Rabala. Basic, not too much, but he knows what Chabad is. He knows.
And respects Chabad, like he's a Oyev Chabad.
Yes,
Respect.
yes. He knows
Okay.
my son.
So he would know Rabbi Kusil Farkash, yeah?
Yes. He's the son of Remaya Brandsdorfer, that is very famous.
Anyway, we're dealing with a very complicated situation. And I have to say, it's connected to addictions. I don't want to even get into Sheil Tachtis. And I honestly didn't want to expose him to too much klipa, but I don't know how much experience he has with that.
Yeah, unfortunately, we in Chabad know what's going on.
Yeah.
Maybe he knows.
I didn't want to,
Maybe.
He thought that everything could be conquered. You just have shalom bayis and geendigt. That you overlook all problems.
So it's good that he spoke to you.
Yeah, I know. It was good. We came to the, I spoke his language. I spoke his language. I kept telling him, Nitn reshus l'reifel arapis, and as Rabbonim, we're not reifim,
He is a wide mind. He's wide-minded.
Baruch Hashem. Good. It was good. We had good conversation. I pushed back certain things. I told him I don't agree with certain things he said. I didn't even know who he was between you and me.
How did you come to him? He's known.
His mishpach, the mishpach of the people that I'm dealing with, went to his office, I guess, and they called me from there.
Okay. Reb Simon, his father's mother, this is addition. His father's mother is my father's sister. So it's a double cousin.
His father's mother, I got it. Okay.
His father's sister is my mother. And his mother's brother is my father.
Ich verstehe.
Okay.
You know what?
So
I better finish the recording here. This doesn't belong on the recording, I believe, right?
Not really.
I forgot about that.
Well, I wanted to ask him if he shared any Ayin Beis with him to try and get him to see the problems in this whatever's going on.
No, we'll get there. We'll get there. It was a good conversation, and I'm glad because he has the respect of them, and I want him to be on board. So I'm not here to.
You should convince him to learn Chassidus also. Something.
Let me stop the recording a minute. Hold on a second. So we're stopping middle of page